Bishop Steve Wood of St. Andrew's Church in Mount Pleasant was in the hospital for many days in early March after being tested positive for the coronavirus. Today, I talk one-on-one with him to see how he's feeling for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Bishop Steve Wood, welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you. Delighted to be with you. I admire your work. Yeah, it's the opportunity to be together.
Oh, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it. Obviously, I hope I get this right, but obviously you are director for the St. Andrew's Anglican Church in Mount Pleasant?
That's correct.
Yes, sir.
And also the bishop for the Anglican Diocese of the Carolinas. So I'm bishop of North and South Carolina. Probably have about 35 churches I oversee.
Wow.
But home base is St. Andrew's. Been there 20 years.
What is the biggest difference between 20 years ago and right now when you think of St. Andrew's Church?
Oh, boy. Night and day. You know, I think when I first got to St. Andrew's, there were about 425 a Sunday. Now, who knows what we have now, right, with COVID? I have no idea what we have right now. But, you know, coming in, and you know, we had a fire a couple years ago. It's been an interesting time. So we're probably, you know, probably still around 1,800 a Sunday.
Wow.
And so just... when I got there, I had one assistant. I have 6 assistant clergy now. We probably have 35 staff, full-time staff, and a lot of changes. Just organizationally, a lot of changes. You know, they didn't teach me anyway. Leadership, management, those kinds of things at seminary. Those have been learning it along the way. So, it's been a good run.
Good run. You talk about leadership and management and Sundays. How do you manage and lead your congregation and your staff on Sundays now throughout the health outbreak?
Yeah, thank you. Well, you know, foundationally it's prayer. I spent a lot of time reading the Bible. I had a bit of downtime last week. Just my wife and I, you know, I'd been down because of COVID, but this was, you know, been back to work 5 Sundays, preached in a row, and my wife and I just took some few days off last week. And I really, I just spent a lot of time reading the Bible. You know, I read the entire Old Testament last week. And just spend time praying. And it's out of that, for me personally, different people lead different ways. No right way, no wrong way. But my leadership style comes out of my Bible reading and prayer life. And so one of my goals is as I lead my staff, is to equip them, encourage them, feed them, both from Scripture, but also other materials and other just life experiences I've learned over the years. You know, I was 36 when I came here. I'm 56 now, and I hope I've learned something in 20 years. I've certainly made enough mistakes. I hope I learned from those. And then same with the congregation. You know, it's praying. It's asking. It's listening to the congregation, right? You certainly want to listen to where your people are, but you also have to listen to where the Lord's saying, because sometimes, you know, like with my kids, you know, there'll be certain meals they'd want to have every night of the week. And it might be fun meals, but there's other things we got to eat too. And so you got to listen to both sides. You got to, you know, there's a verse in the Scriptures that tells the shepherds to know the condition of their flocks.
Right.
Kind of the image behind that was the shepherd literally running his fingers through the fleece of the flock of the sheep, just to find the burrs and find the sore spots and find the wounds. And I think that's part of the job of the shepherd of the congregation, is to know your flock.
Right.
But also it's to know the good shepherd, the great shepherd.
Yes.
And to seek his counsel on where he might want to lead you, or what he might want you to address with the church. And I think actually, you know, that latter point, that's happening all over Charleston right now. You know, I'm involved with Mission Charleston, and
Yes.
we're in a sermon series right now called Undivided. And we have a significant number of churches across the Charleston area looking at this question of how does a church respond to the social, societal issues that we're facing right now. And you know, and you got to present God's point of view to the best that you can, wanting to be faithful to Him, right? Not pulling punches, but wanting to be faithful to Him. So,
yes.
Yeah, so you know, it's a listening to both. With the church, it's reading the culture, it's listening to what God might say through His Word and through His Spirit.
What would be the title of your sermon right now?
Well, this Sunday it's Love Mercy. So we're working through Micah 6:8, do justice, love mercy. And so of course, in English, it's mercy. The Greek word is phenomenal. The Hebrew word, sorry. The Hebrew word's phenomenal. It's hesed. It's this great idea. Anytime you read in the Old Testament of God's steadfast love, God's loving kindness, right. All of this is tied up in this understanding of mercy. And so, we can be personally, so as we begin to work this out, getting a little preview of Sunday here, as we begin to work this out in the church, we talk about justice, right? It's a great concept that we all want to move towards. But what does it mean? How is it enfleshed? What does it look like? And one of the primary ways that that's worked out, the justice is worked out, is through mercy, through loving kindness, through this steadfast love. And again, I think sometimes in our culture, for Christians, it's defining what we mean. Sure. Because, we love everything from, butter pecan ice cream to a TV show. But when we talk about God's love, it's a particular kind of love. It's a love that's enfleshed, incarnate, and it seeks the best for the other person. And so this week we begin to make that shift from just an idea, what is justice, right, to actually how do we enflesh this? How do we do this? And part of it, not totally, but part of it is this idea of mercy and loving kindness and steadfast love and seeking the best for another person. And in our case too, as well, our culture. And,
exactly right. Yeah. What are you seeking right now, Bishop?
Well, words. If any of your folks are praying folks, it has always been an awesome thing in the sense of feeling the weight of stepping into a pulpit, and it always can at times feel presumptuous to even think you can speak on God's behalf. I think for me personally, it's only God's call in my life as a minister that encourages me and God's word that encouraged me. So, always seeking wisdom, always seeking understanding, always seeking courage to be faithful to the biblical text. And so that's what I seek right now.
You talked earlier about being down because of the coronavirus and obviously weight. We all know that you were one of the first people here in South Carolina to be diagnosed positively with coronavirus back in March. And I want to go back to the Post and Courier article in which writer Jennifer Berry Harris wrote this. She says this, quote, "Through the dream world of heavy sedation, unmoored from time and space, a psalm drifted. Long before COVID-19 tried to claim his earthly body, Bishop Steve Wood loved the psalms, including this one. You will not fear the terror of night, nor the arrows that fly by day, nor the pestilence that stalks in the day, nor the plague that destroys at midday." When did you know, Bishop, that this terror, the coronavirus, was near and nearby you?
Oh, well, I was caught off guard, quite honestly. I'd watch the news like others had. I'd read, I think Jennifer's one of my favorite journalists, so I read the Post and Courier. And at that time, because it really was early, I mean, the best guess is I was exposed, we're guessing, on March 6th. So that was really early in the game.
Right.
And I had thought I had done everything right. At that point, social distancing was 3 feet, not 6 feet.
Right.
So I was keeping my 3-foot barriers. I carried Purell in my pocket. I just thought I was doing everything right. And by that second week, by around, I guess it was the 13th, 15th, somewhere around there, March, I started feeling sick. And at first I thought it was, I'll get seasonal bronchitis. So as particularly fall into winter, winter into spring,
right.
Those seasonal changes, I'll often get a bronchitis. And it's kind of what it felt like at first. And we did my normal stuff on the Monday that week. I did a chest x-ray, which was clear. It was perfect on Monday. So we just assumed it was right at the beginning edge of bronchitis. We took my normal precautions, got a steroid shot, took oral steroids, put me on an antibiotic. And but by Thursday, I was sick. And I felt a little better Tuesday. Wednesday was iffy, but Thursday morning, overnight, Wednesday into Thursday, my fever was 103 plus, and having a hard time breathing. And so, but even then, I still didn't really think that's what it was, just because I thought I'd done everything right. But I went to East Cooper Hospital for a chest x-ray, and they admitted me immediately and said that my lungs were showing every evidence. There's a certain pattern that they see in your lungs. My lungs were showing every evidence of COVID. It's still my COVID test, positive test, I don't even know if it came back before they put me. I think it must have come back right as they were putting me on the ventilator, but I think they made the decision to put me on the ventilator before the test came back.
Oh my God. And she also goes on to say this, and you just mentioned this just a second ago. Obviously, you're 56 years old. She said this, quote, "At 56, the father of four had once trained for a triathlon. He led the bustling St. Andrew's Church in Mount Pleasant with 2,000 members. He was the bishop of a regional diocese with 31 churches and 4 new ones being planted. Now, at the foot of his bed, a whiteboard told him the names of his nurses, doctors, and medications, and the date. What exactly were those medications?"
Oh man, well, who would guess any of this would become controversial and political? But at the time, they put me on the hydrochloroquine, which is the malaria medicine. They put me on Zithromax, and they put me on zinc, and they did that right from the get-go. They ordered. I don't know if you still have to do it this way, but at the time, you had to make a case or request for the remdesivir, and by the time the remdesivir was approved and was shipped to me, I think the next day I came off the ventilator, and so they were holding it in reserve. Right. But I came off and was rallying by that point. But so multiple, and then while I was there, I got a strep infection while I was there, and related to the ventilator, and so there was another round of antibiotics for that. And the other thing about it wasn't getting really was anything for pain, just because there was no Motrin, no Advil, none of that kind of stuff.
Wow.
Yeah.
Let me ask you some more about this, because she said this, quote, "He stayed home just in case and called his doctor, who directed him to the Medical University of South Carolina telemedicine portal." And this is back on March 15th. On Monday, they sent him to get his coronavirus tested at MUSC's drive-through site in West Ashley. The results would take several days. How long did that test take?
Well, the actual test itself is, minute maybe. I mean, they put that swab, feels like through your brain, up your nose, and then I guess it took. I guess that was a Monday. I'm thinking maybe Friday is when the test came back. So what is that? 5 days? So it's still pretty much what it's running right now to get the results back. But it was pretty clear. Like I said, when they did the X-ray, there was a certain pattern that they see in your lungs, and it was present. So they were pretty confident that's what it was.
And of course, your wife, Jackie, who was an MUSC nurse, jumped into nurse mode when you got really sick. What was that mode like for you?
When Jack gets serious, I know it's serious. And she'd been, up until Thursday, she'd been saying, "Oh, you're getting better." I mean, I actually, I drove her to work on Wednesday because she just needed me to take her down. And so I took her down Wednesday morning before her shift and picked her up Wednesday night, told her I was feeling bad, but she said, "Oh, you're tired." But then overnight when I ran the fever, she knew it was time to take action. So she drove me to the emergency room at East Cooper just to, as I said, neither of us had any expectation I'd be admitted immediately. We just thought I was getting another chest x-ray to see where things stood.
Right.
And they came in and said, "We need to admit you now." And so, within roughly 24 hours, I was on the ventilator, which I didn't expect that either.
And how long were you on the actual ventilator?
16 days total. And it was, 10 days total on the ventilator, 16 days in the hospital. I was hospitalized again about 10 days later. They found out after I was discharged, because this is also new, that people with COVID are at a higher risk to make blood clots. And I ended up back in the hospital 10 days later with 2 blood clots in my leg, and spent 4 more days getting that treated. So,
oh my God,
yeah, it was interesting. It was an interesting time.
And during that time, Bishop, did you have any GI issues?
No, I mean, I didn't have diarrhea. I didn't have any of those kind of symptoms. My chest, for me, the primary issue was chest. I couldn't breathe. I could not catch a breath. I had a little bit of a cough, certainly running a fever, had a runny nose. But, I guess the other side of it too is, and people are different. When I don't feel good, I don't eat. And so, I wasn't eating. And so GI issues weren't really a big thing for me.
And the article goes on to say this. Obviously, it says this quote: "So Wood got into his usual routine of steroids and antibiotics and went home." This is prior to you being hospitalized.
Yeah.
How long did those steroids and antibiotics actually last?
Well, they were still in my system when they admitted me. I was still taking the antibiotic. I was still taking they gave me a steroid shot. And if you have, I don't know if you do, but I'll have allergies and the seasonal issues. So the steroid shot works, makes me feel better almost immediately, kind of gives me energy, right? And I felt that on the Monday and Tuesday, I was certainly feeling a little better. The oral steroid and the oral antibiotic, I was still on when I went into the hospital, and then they obviously took me off those things while I was in there.
And let me go back to obviously the time that you went to Pawleys Island, because obviously you traveled there with Reverend Randy, who's one of your church associate ministers. Yep. But he also went to the conference on Pawleys Island. Love Pawleys Island, by the way. And he actually had to self-quarantine after feeling sick. They compared to some symptoms which didn't look much like. How long after Pawleys Island did Randy really felt bad in your mind?
Yeah, well, three of my clergy, Anthony Kobadu, my clergy associate, Randy Forrester, and myself, we were all at the event at Pawleys, and I think Anthony got sick first. He felt sick on a Sunday, and had passed out that Sunday during the service, and then Randy and I were almost simultaneous, although I got my COVID test before he got his. His symptoms were different than mine. His were more flu-like. Mine were more respiratory. I think he had some of the nausea and such, the GI things. So there were some similarities, but some differences. And Anthony, other than that initial wave of passing out, was relatively asymptomatic. And so each one of us had a slightly different experience of symptoms, and each one of us had a different experience from mild, mostly asymptomatic, to Randy's, which was kind of a more immediate experience. I think his symptoms lasted maybe 3 weeks, to mine, which were, a total of 20 days in the hospital.
Oof.
Yeah.
And the article goes on to say this: "Something isn't right," she thought, meaning your wife. 8 days had passed since your first symptoms, and obviously you all went back to the hospital. And when she peeled up, obviously she couldn't come in. Inside, a radiologist did another chest X-ray. A doctor called Jackie. What was different about the second chest X-ray, Bishop?
My lungs were filled with fluid. So what the first chest X-ray showed, just clear lungs, fine. But the second chest X-ray showed that my lungs had been obliterated with this, and just there's the pattern, and then there was the fluid that was in the lungs, and which ultimately led, on that Thursday. So it was a Thursday morning when we went back in, got the X-ray. They tried me on different kinds of a cannula with oxygen, and then they put me on a non-rebreather mask, and they had to keep dialing up the level of oxygen. And they told me by Thursday night that this wasn't going in the right direction. And of course, Jackie, I FaceTimed her because I didn't think anything of the mask I had on. I just FaceTimed her, hey, look at the mask they put on me. And I knew by her face she wasn't happy with the mask they put on me. And she knew that the next step was a respirator if this wasn't going to work.
And I know the article goes on to say this, quote, "Over the years, Wood had tucked a lot of scripture close to his heart. Also a lot of bad poetry. The stanza wanted to circle through his dreams. A line about, quote, fighting one more round."
Yeah.
Why did you fight one more round with this?
It was kind of in that, the dream state, because it was fascinating, because I was told, doctors told me, they told Jack that, with the medical sedation, I would be out. There'd be no cognitive experience. And I don't debate that, but I had cognitive experience somewhere in there. I don't know where or how, and I'd read too, since that article was written, I'd read a number of people that had COVID ventilator experiences, had nightmares while they were under. And I was thankful that mine weren't that way. I had pleasant encounters.
Yes.
And so, so in that time frame is when that Psalm 91 was rolling through my mind, but then also the poems. I make a habit. It's been a very long habit, 30, 40 year habit of After lunch, I always read a poem when I get back in the office. I find that poetry helps me have a better command of the English language. And I think poetry is also the language of the heart. So when I want to preach to people, I don't want to just engage their head, but also their heart. And so with that, I've read great poems over the years, but I also read bad poems. And this was a poem I'd read in high school. And it was by gentleman Jim Corbett, who is the heavyweight boxing champ in the late 19th century. And it was about fighting one more round. And I remember having the thought when I was on the ventilator, and again, I don't know how this happens, but I do remember thinking at the time just how tired I was. And I remember having the sensation, having the awareness, and I think Jennifer picked up in this in the article, that I knew I was in the presence of God. I didn't see him, but I knew I was in the presence of God. And it wasn't a voice, but it was something communicated to my mind, almost verbatim: you've run a good race and you can come home if you want. And I was really enticed by that because I understood what home meant, was heaven.
Right.
And I was really enticed by that. And I remember it just seemed like, the Apostle John in the book of Revelation said that there was a silence in heaven that seemed to last forever.
Right.
And I had that experience. I was just sitting there waiting okay, I don't know what I want to do. And then I started thinking about the images, the thoughts of my wife and my sons and their wives and my grandchildren.
Right.
And I don't remember how I thought it, but I remember saying to God, I'm just too tired to fight. And this poem started going through my mind. And it was basically saying, no matter how tired you are, go fight one more round. And so I remember telling God, I'm so tired, I can't fight, but I'm not going to throw in the towel. If death is going to take me, it's going to be by a knockout. But I said, I want to fight, but I'm tired. And then that's when Psalm 91 kicked in immediately. And this really strange thing, I heard, as soon as I said that, I was like in Israel, right? I've been to Israel several times. One of my favorite places is way in the north, right on the Lebanese border by the ancient city of Dan. And you're in a grove of trees. And I was there, and I heard marching through the tops of those trees. And it was confusing to me. And as I was hearing the marching, like an army marching, Psalm 91 started being read, spoken. And it was confusing because I thought, for the life of me, I couldn't think of anything in Psalm 91 that talked about marching in treetops. And when I woke up, it was still on my mind. I mean, this was so fresh for me, but I didn't have the dexterity to work my iPhone, my fingers,
right.
And my throat was so bad, Siri didn't recognize me. And so about 2 days later, I just kept rolling this over because I didn't want to forget it. 2 days later, I was able to kind of type in "Marching in Treetops Bible," and 2 verses came up in the Bible, both of them about the same event when David was facing his adversaries, the Philistines. And God told David, when you hear the marching in the treetops, know that I have gone before you to fight your battle.
Right.
And I thought, so after the fact, that was very encouraging to me that I heard that. And then I heard Psalm 91 of the Lord's covering and protection.
Right.
And even though I was sick, ultimately, obviously spared.
Yes. Yeah. And thank God you're here.
Amen.
And I know, obviously, you got out of the hospital because, a few days later, Jackie pulled up to the hospital's front door, the staff director to the back, and in a wheelchair, you emerged, covered in a gown, mask, cap, and gloves. Nurses obviously were in full protective gear that brought you to her, and obviously the relief poured over her, and she was overwhelmed. How overwhelming was that experience for you leaving a hospital after so many days?
I couldn't wait to get out. And I would say, I hope I was a good patient, but I know the last day I was not a good patient because I was ready to go home. And the nurses were phenomenal. The medical staff were great. Yes. You see the doctors once a day. You see the nurses all the time.
Right.
And, and I would try to encourage them. But that last day, they told me on Thursday, you'll probably go home tomorrow. Well, Friday was getting late, and I knew how checkouts work. And I thought, I'm not going home. They're not going to let me go home. So I ripped off all my monitors, on my heart monitors. And they all came in. I said, I'm ready to go home. And they said, well, they put them back on. And I took them all off again. And I said, I'm going home. And they said, well, you probably are going home, Mr. Wood, but if you take these monitors off one more time, we're going to restrain you. So I understood that. And so on the way out, probably about a couple hours later was when I was discharged, and they they formed that kind of gauntlet. So all the nursing staff, they were all applauding for me and cheering. They were playing "Celebrate," the song, and they were wheeling me down the hall, and it was really it was wonderful on their part. And then getting outside and seeing Jackie. I hadn't seen her in 16 days, and it was an emotional reunion. And
Wow.
And they wouldn't let me. They wheeled me right up to the car. They wouldn't let me get out until they'd wheeled me up, and it was good. It was good to be reunited. But the staff were fantastic. They were fantastic. They took such good care of me. The doctors and the nurses were extraordinary.
Oh, I bet they were.
Yeah.
And, I was just interviewing Nancy Mace. She just was diagnosed with, obviously, coronavirus, and, she's feeling better now out of quarantine. How long were you how long were you in quarantine before you can actually go back outside?
Yeah, well, one of my issues, too, is just a weakened immune system. And so I got out of the hospital on April 3rd, was readmitted April 24th, right around there, in 4 more days. And so I pretty much stayed in the house. They told me mid-May I could get back out and engage, but I still don't go out very much. I just, they don't know how, they told me they don't know how, if I have immunities, how long they last. They don't know what level of antibodies you need. And so I do Sunday services outside. We're still streaming, but we also meet outside at the farmer's market at 9 o'clock. So I do those services, and I've gone to the store a couple times, but and I have a life group, a small group that I'll see some of those folks because everyone's seriously quarantining. I think for St. Andrew's people, having 3 of their clergy get sick and having me in the hospital, this was not an abstract thought. This was reality. This was in your own church family. And so I think folks were very aware of it from that in a new way, right? And so I'm still pretty careful. I still have to go get doctor visits. I'm still doing blood work periodically. I have another pulmonary fitness test coming up in August to measure what, if any, lasting damage has been done to my lungs. Don't know about that yet, but I still feel things. I still have tightness in my chest. I've had downstream symptoms from this as well, or downstream, not symptoms, but downstream problems that have emerged from this. And which, again, being one of the first to have it, I would tell them I'm having these symptoms, and they would say, well, this is what it looks like. And then they'd find out 2 weeks later, oh, yeah, well, this is something that happens for people with COVID. I just had it first because I had it first.
Right.
So, and that's helpful. So much of what I was told for 2 or 3 months was we don't know because it's a new thing. It's a novel virus. But now they do have some ideas. Now they do know. And that's been reassuring to hear some answers from the medical world, some expectation you probably will get over this in 18 months or whatever they're saying for different symptoms or different maladies, not symptoms, but maladies.
And as you mentioned earlier, everything's become sort of political these days.
Yeah.
But what's your message for the average person out there right now who wants to wear a mask or who doesn't want to wear a mask?
Wear the flipping mask. It's not that hard, and as a Christian, it's not even about me, When we talk about loving our neighbor, it's not a warm, sentimental feeling, although it may be. Loving your neighbor is an action that you take on their behalf. So if me wearing a mask means you, Quentin, don't get sick, I will happily wear a mask. Because it's not just protecting me, it protects both of us. I mean, the medical numbers of if both people are wearing masks, the rate of infection plummets. And I'm sitting here thinking, you're not being asked to walk on crutches. I mean, it's wearing a mask. It's not hard. And it's not all day. I think of my nurses. I think of my wife. I mean, they're wearing masks 12, 14 hours a day. They come home raw. You're going into Publix. It's going to take you 20 minutes. Wear a mask. And and I don't know how that's become a political issue. How politics has trumped medicine on this issue is bewildering to me.
Well, thank God you're alive and you're, getting on the road to healing. And thank you for your time here on Quentin's Close-Ups, Bishop. I really do appreciate this, by the way.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Enjoyed having the chance just to talk with you. I've appreciated what you've done with these interviews.
Oh, thank you so much. And when things get better, I'll come out to the old village.
We'd love to have you. We'd love to shake your hand in person when we're allowed to do that again.
Yes, indeed. Absolutely.
God bless you, brother.
Likewise.